Hi, good evening, and welcome to the Minority Report. We're here on Tobago Updates channel, and it's indeed a pleasure to be back with you this week after a short break where we took a bit of a hiatus. I want to encourage you this evening. We have a very interesting program in front of us, and so it would augur well for you to invite your friends, your families to have a seat, and you can view this program on Tobago Updates website, the Tobago Updates YouTube channel, the Tobago Updates Facebook page, which is most frequently visited and viewed, and also we are live on M&E TV, so you can sit in the comfort of your living rooms, pull up M&E TV as well, and view the Minority Report. We encourage your comments and we welcome some of your questions and so forth. So you can send your questions to the WhatsApp number that is 284-6597. Let me repeat, 284-6597. And we want you to share some of your conversations, your observations, your questions, and so forth with us. And we're going to make it into a real discussion. This evening we have quite a lot lined up, and we know that this is indeed budget season. And so we're going to be having some discussions later in the program. But before we get there, we normally have our headline corner. And this week it's not as happy or it's not as encouraging, because we would have seen a number of murders on the island over the last week or so. Initially we would have had 2 back-to-back, then we saw a domestic dispute end as a fatality, and then we saw another shooting. In addition to that, as of yesterday, I think it was, we see a young lady, 15-year-old young lady, also reported missing. And so we see quite a bit of a downturn in terms of what has been happening on the island. However, in our What's Good moment, we want to be able to say, even though it is after the fact, Happy Republic Day to Trinidad and Tobago. We would have celebrated our 46th Republic Day anniversary on Saturday last. And quite a celebration it was throughout the Twin Island. We would have had a number of festivities in the Roxborough area, where we would have seen the march past, the parade and so on, and it would have ended with a cultural event in the evening. And you know, it's quite an honor for us to reach to 46. We would have recently celebrated our Independence Day as well, 60 years going strong. And just a bit of tip, as it were, with the Republican status. We would have been celebrating our Republic Day on the 24th of September, but I don't know how many persons know and remember that Republic Day was actually pronounced on the 1st of August, that is in 1976. However, it was moved to be commemorated on the 24th of September, because that would have been the first day that the Parliament would have met as a republic status in terms of the nation. We would have seen even a suspension of Republic Day between 1999 and 2001. However, in 2002 it was reinstated, and that suspension came because of the Shouter Baptist Liberation holiday that was then introduced. However, the need and the necessity for us to commemorate our Republican status was reinstated in 2002, and since then we've continued to see celebrations where we acknowledge and we recognize that time when we became a republic, where we outlawed, or we banished, as it were, the monarchy, and we then had our own president. So this evening we're going to have a really packed program. We're going to have a lot of intense discussions. And as I said in the beginning, we want to encourage you to share your comments as well as we look into the budget. I have some special guests in studio with me. And when we come back, we're going to introduce everyone and we're going to kick our discussions off this evening. Stay logged on, stay locked on. And I'll encourage you to share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back.
national borders. Our first step to security, but a possible access point for guns, drugs, crime. If it does not look right, do the right thing. Call Crime Stoppers anonymously. 800-847-7. Report possible border crime.
There's a taste in the air everywhere. Feel the vibe cause it's something to share. Smooth, rich and creamy, you'll find it right here. Makes you smile, relax a while, it's fun and good cheer. Ooh, enjoy every scoop. Ooh, every taste will get you hooked. We have flavors that you love, a combination special. Come along, enjoy our treats. This is Uncle Pete's.
And we're back this evening on the Minority Report. We want to get right into it, and I have some special guests in studio. They're fixed guests, actually, and we always see them on this particular program because the program centers around the conversation that is created by these individuals. And firstly, I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome the Minority Leader, Assemblyman Kelvon Morris, to the set this evening.
Good evening, Mr. David, and good evening Tobago, good evening Trinidad and Tobago, everyone locked on.
I want to take the opportunity to his immediate left to welcome the Minority Councillor, Mrs. Petal Daniel Benoit, radiant as usual.
Good evening, Marilyn. Good evening, Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago, and to the other gentlemen on the panel, Minority Leader, and I wouldn't give out our and also, as they say in football, the man on the wing. One a very dangerous player on the field. We also have as guest with us this evening the Honorable Senator Lawrence Hislop sharing with us and bringing a lot to the table. Welcome, Senator.
Good evening, Marilyn. Good evening, Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago, Kelvon, Petal. Good to be here. It's a pleasure. Interesting introduction, Marilyn.
It's always a pleasure, and I mean, we have a real heavy panel this evening. And as I indicated earlier, we are discussing this evening the 2022-2023 budget. It's a heavy topic. I know there has been much conversation at all levels. We would have had the pre-conversations where we had a number of speculations and that kind of thing coming from many different sectors. But now budget day has come. The budget has been read. It has been settled, and as the Bible says, forever settled in heaven. and so it is out there. I want us to begin the conversation by each of you taking the opportunity to just share a bit of what you felt or how you felt. I know you all were present firsthand. There's a difference between having the first-hand experience and listening to it on the radio and you're getting distracted and so on. So I'll invite you all. Join the conversation.
Well, of course, we are ladies, gentlemen, so we'll allow Minority Council.
Thank you, gentlemen. Well, being there first-hand witnessing the budget presentation was a really good experience. Well, for me, it wasn't my first experience because in my previous incarnation, we would have attended the budget presentation. But what I must do is commend the Minister of Finance on the presentation yesterday. I know what this minister, Honorable Colin Burt, he has been trying to reduce the financing or the budget deficit since he became the Minister of Finance. So this year, the deficit is $1.5 1.10 billion, or 8% of the GDP, and it's the expenditure, the national budget is approximately 57.685 billion. What I did appreciate is that the minister stuck to his script, and the over politicizing of the budget, we understood what he said. We appreciated what he said. There were some measures, of course, that would have been implemented to try to reduce the deficit of the budget, and what he would have attempted to do is to try to offset some of the burden on the taxpayer, so to speak. So the minister would have increased the personal tax allowance. He would have also introduced the ex gratia, and that was included in the budget, the ex gratia payment for
in the national budget.
In the national budget, but this is not the THA ex gratia.
That's what I said. The national budget.
The national budget ex gratia for frontline and health workers, and we know that these frontline workers would have done yeoman service as we battled the COVID-19 pandemic. He would have also included some measures as it relates to senior citizens. So $1,000 to offset the increases in different fuel, airfare, transportation, and that kind of thing. So as well as to increase the VAT allowance. So I think there was an attempt to, yes, there may have been burden on the taxpayer with the attempt to decrease the budget deficit. However, an attempt was made to try to offset those burdens.
So before we move on, you stated something, and again, because you are the financial mind, I would like, for the benefit of all of us, the term that you used, reduce the deficit. Could you give us a bit more clarity in terms of, for those listening, what does it mean to attempt to reduce the budget deficit?
Okay, so in terms of budget, there's a revenue side of the budget and there's an expenditure side of the budget. The ideal situation that every government would want is a balanced budget where your revenue is equal to your expenditure. But we have seen over the years that our expenditure is in excess of our revenues. So annually, what we try to do is come close as possible and come as close as possible to having a balanced budget, meaning that our revenues is equal to our expenditure. So this year we came a little closer than we did last year and the previous years. And of course, in doing that, some burden is placed on the taxpayers.
Okay, so we bring it closer where we have less space between what we earn and what we spend.
And what we spend.
Okay. Wow. So, Minority Leader.
Let me once again, I would like to join with Minority Councillor Benoit, commend the Minister of Finance, his technical team, also the Minister of Planning and her technical team, as well as the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I know we take it for granted how difficult governance is, because you have a multiplicity of interests all at the same time, battling for scarce resources, and you now have to be able to balance the needs of all the different interests and at the same time deal with prevailing conditions, sometimes some that you have no control over. And for instance, in terms of the war in Ukraine, that would have inflated both food prices, gas prices, everything, shipment prices. So, and you now have, we also had the unforeseen COVID-19 pandemic, which we were battling for over 2 years, which would have, in the first instance, reduced revenue significantly. And because of the war in Ukraine, we are now seeing some kind of rebounding of fuel prices that would have allowed us additional revenues that we did not forecast or did not really prepare for before this one. So I want to commend them for being able to steady the ship even in rough waters.
Yes.
And we tend to forget that we are still in difficult times. So when I look at the measures that would have been put in place, I think the budget is one that is quite reasonable, quite fair. There are considerations for every interest group and there's even a greater consideration for those that are most vulnerable. If you look at the social safety net, you would have seen an increase to ensure that those persons that depend on the state the most, that they are able to get that kind of buffer to ensure that they can function just as the rest of us who are able to take care of our own responsibilities. And I know for a lot of persons, I've been listening in this space, and a lot of persons, they are concerned, yes, about the increase in the fuel prices, because the state has now taken a policy because of the challenges that we are facing, that we can no longer carry the burden of the subsidy as we used to. So the state is still paying a subsidy. I think, but what they have done is cap it at $1 billion, and it means therefore that those of us who utilize, have to use fuel in the way that we do for transportation would now have to pay an extra bit at the pump, and we know that would cause some sort of discomfort. I understand persons would be concerned, but if you look globally, what is happening, it is the global trend where fuel prices is going up all over the world. So it's not immune to Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, we still remain one of the lowest countries when it comes to fuel costs. And if you look, the government would have also even bite the bullet on diesel, because diesel is where a lot of inputs goes into manufacturing and all that kind of thing. And they would have made sure that the diesel price didn't go up in the way that it should have. So you recognize there were a less, in terms of the percentage increase was lower in terms of diesel. So I think the minister would have been fair. We all, when you look at the transport costs for Tobago, inter-island transport, we all have agreed that we must pay something extra, because when you look comparatively, we are really blessed to have such a low. Imagine you're paying $50 to travel inter-island. I don't know where else. That is almost less than $10 US. When I go, if you travel abroad and you have to use a train, just to take a train ride from one avenue to the next, and you're paying almost $5 to $6 and that kind of thing. So comparatively, I think we are still blessed. And what I would expect and would hope, because we've been clamoring for efficiency as well. So we can't want efficiency in terms of the airline and the sea bridge, but don't want to pay a little thing extra, understanding that we are already, it is already heavily subsidized. We are already losing on it. It is an essential service. So we are saying that perhaps we all have to give a little, share the burden to get the kind of efficiency that we want out of the service. So I think the fair, as a state, the state now would understand that the population would also expect that as we pay a little more, that we should also get some level of increased efficiency in terms of how the air and sea bridge is administered.
Operate. So I think Minority Leader, we based on what you explained there, is like we're back in the position where it's a reality now of it's not just what your country could do for you,
but what you can do,
what you can do for your country. Senator?
Heavy, the statement, heavy is the head
that wears
the crown. I want to join with my colleagues in commending the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, Minister of Planning, the entire cabinet, the entire team, because the preparation of, and I'm no finance guru, but the preparation of a national budget, a macroeconomic picture is not an easy task. It is not for the faint-hearted. And as minority leader would have said, there are so many prevailing factors as it relates to preparing this document and preparing the way forward for 2023. And you have so many interests throughout the country that desire their slice of the pie. And in some instances, the slice of the pie is extremely large. And we have to ask ourselves the question, if we were, how do we do it in our own homes? How do you share up, how do you divide up a pie in your own home, especially when you have external factors that you have no control over? And so I commend, some people will say that we just being party hacks. But I want to commend the Minister of Finance. I want to commend the government for actually putting forward a policy document that sought to encapsulate everybody and sought to bring an understanding as to where we are as a country. And I empathize with citizens, with all of us, because I went to the gas station this afternoon to fill up my pickup, and what would usually from empty take me to a full tank of $200 didn't reach full. And I got back in the vehicle and I was anxious to see the gauge, and I'm like, wow. And that is just the reality that we all face. And I think sometimes individuals would think that we don't experience the same thing. And so I commend the minister and the team for the work that they have done. The balance, I wish that the gas price didn't have to go up. I wish that there wasn't an increase in the air bridge and the sea bridge. I wish that we didn't have to raise anything, or the government didn't have to raise anything. But that's not the reality on a global scale. Because when we consider, and sometimes I feel that we have this belief that Trinidad and Tobago is in a vacuum, and is not affected by by external forces. And you look throughout, every country in the world is feeling the pinch, and I honestly think, and I'm looking at this from a logical standpoint, that we as a country, we have weathered, and we are weathering external shocks well. Now there's room for improvement in everything. But when a public servant can still at the end of the month receive his or her salary, we understand that the public servants would like to receive a significant raise in pay. But we really have to ask ourselves the question, what do I want? Am I riding out the storm, or am I going to sink the ship because I want what I want? And let's remember that we are not in a vacuum. And when you look at even the increases on the air bridge and the sea bridge, the government is still paying a significant subsidy in subsidies. We talk about efficiency and the raise in the ferry price, but I want to compliment the inter-island ferry service for its level of efficiency. And if we are to really and truly pay for the efficiency that we get with the fast ferries, you could set your watch more often than not by the time the ferries depart.
And they arrive.
And your quality of sail, because we're talking about 2 brand new vessels, so the quality of sail, there is still a surplus of seats on the inter-island ferry. because we come in here and the Galleons Passage is docking, and sometimes these ferries travel out of peak season empty.
Yeah.
But the staff still has to be paid. You still have to service the vessels, and you still have to put fuel. Who does that? When all we are paying is what, $75 one way?
No,
$50. Right. Yeah.
And it's been increased to $75.
Yeah.
So, and when you look at the subsidy on the ferry, it is significantly higher than the subsidy for the air bridge.
Yeah.
Because those ferries don't run cheap.
And you know, when you look as well, because sometimes we tend to focus only on the things that perhaps went upward, but the amount of opportunities that there are, and that is something I think sometimes we need to really sit down and where in this budget can I see an opportunity that that I can capitalize on. And if I'm a young person, for instance, I see where we have now strengthened, reinforced, expanded GATE to the point that if you were someone who started with a certificate or an associate, you can still now access GATE to also get your bachelor's. Persons who are into technical, vocational and so forth, if you did a lower level TVEC sort of certification, you can now go to level 5 and access GATE. So, and then you look even at the apprenticeship, which I think I'm going to take credit for, because we have made that recommendation to the THA about this apprenticeship program for young people, and I'm seeing the government now has adopted it as a policy, and I want to commend the Minister of Youth. I want to commend the government for seeing the importance of training and preparing young persons to transition from high school, secondary school, into the world of work, where they can have that additional exposure. And you know, so there are a number of exciting opportunities. Businesses, especially
agriculture, that's significant.
Small and micro enterprises.
Allocated to agriculture.
Is the largest because usually it'd be like in the hundred millions. $1.3 billion, and you have, especially coming out of Ministry of Youth again, this focus on youth
in
entrepreneurs in agriculture, where they are actually giving you land, giving you the financing, and allowing you the training as well, so that you can go out and become a successful entrepreneur in agriculture. So you know, sometimes we only see the graphs as half.
No, because let's be fair, and if we are really objective in Trinidad and Tobago, we will recognize that there are benefits to be had from living in this country.
Yes.
And sometimes we take those benefits for granted. And we had to be careful, because when it gets to the point where we are being ungrateful.
I'm glad you actually brought that up, because I wanted to go in that same direction. I was looking at some of the comments that were being made in terms of social media and so on. And there were persons on the social media who were touting that, listen, it's best we get other islands' prime minister to come and take over this place. And what was ironic is that there was not one individual who responded that agreed with them, you know. Because one, the island's prime minister they were talking about was under the IMF rule.
But more than that, I don't know if you all saw a headline coming out of one of our our Caribbean brothers and sisters, Barbados.
Going back to the IMF.
That's what I'm talking about. Exactly.
The other
they're going
point
back.
they have said is that they are not going to provide any kind of salary increase for public servants at this time.
But remember, a few years ago, they would have reduced
by 5,000. I think it was 5,000 jobs.
So just to piggyback, as you said, I think we take a lot of things for granted, and we have to be mindful. And for me, I thank the government for the management of the economy. because yes, there is room for improvement, but we could have been in a worse state.
Correct.
Particularly going through the past 2 years that we would have gone through the COVID-19 pandemic, then into the Russia-Ukraine war, all the external factors that we have no control over. This PNM-led government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has managed in such a way that we have put our own measures in place to ensure that we do not go to the IMF like our other Caribbean
Yes.
And then we are forced to implement
stringent measures. And Minority Leader, you said something, and again, I think that is a point that needs to be reinforced to the general public. People operate, and Senator, you backed it up. People think, and they are the naysayers who sell it to the public because they like the noise and the bacchanal. That is only in Trinidad and Tobago we under this pressure. But these are global issues. Every continent is experiencing this.
See, not only is it a global issue, but when we consider some of the things that we have grown accustomed to as luxury. So I understand the challenge of the senior citizens now have to pay to travel on the ferry. But when these things were implemented, the country was in a position where we could have absorbed it.
Exactly.
Because if you go, even if you go to a first world country, do you think the senior citizens ride the bus free in the United States? You have to pay.
You have to pay.
You have to pay to
Just
ride
today I told someone that.
So yes, and I remember, sorry, and they enjoyed it to the extent that I have a friend who used to tell me, hey, I could go all the way to San Fernando and not pay a cent because I ride the bus free, I ride the ferry, I ride the water taxi, and I make the return trip without paying a cent. We could have done that when there was money flowing, when we had
better
revenue, when we had better times. Now everybody is tightening up. Why do we think that Trinidad and Tobago doesn't have to tighten up?
But and Senator, the thing is, the measures were put in place, so there's an increase, particularly to the senior citizens, of $25 on the inter-island ferry. However, in an attempt to reduce the burden, the Minister of Finance would have offered senior citizens $1,000 one-time payment. So there's an understanding that yes, this is a burden, it would have affected you. However, in an attempt to offset that, this is what we will do.
For me though, I would want to see at some point, and I'm not too sure it may come out as the discussions go, but like some consideration perhaps for the minimum wage perhaps. I think some consideration should be given to at least increase in the minimum wage, because
I just want to address something quick, Marilyn. I don't think people understand me clearly, because if this was not a PNM administration in central government, and the world was facing this scenario, and it was required of another administration to take similar measures, they would have gotten support from me. Because this is how I see this thing. It's either we swim together or we sink together. And if it means that some people have to pull a little harder, if it means that we all have to pull a little harder to make the ship stay afloat, then that's what we do. Because a country is not an individual thing. It's all of us in this boat, you know. And if you have one segment asking for 19% increase, which is unsustainable, going down next 2-3 years, people might be laid off if you give that 19% increase. What happens 2-3 years down the road? Then you have to send home 3,000 public servants.
But and people this is only one period we're talking about. So
exactly.
You have another period to go, and current, and so I don't think the government would have gone at lengths to explain what is the
Current
economic
situation.
reality. So it's not like they've been hiding, you know.
And those figures could be seen by everybody. You can't.
So, you know.
It's not like the minister is pulling out figures from a hat. Sometimes I think we don't recognize and pay respect to our public servants.
Correct.
The persons who are actually crunching the numbers in the ministry. I don't think we recognize the level of work that they do, because we see the minister and that's what you get elected for, to take blows when you need to take blows. But those figures are not hidden figures. Those figures are there for everybody to see.
Because Peter, and perhaps you can share the robustness of a budget prep, because you know, as Lawrence rightfully said, for a lot of people they believe it's just the politicians sitting down and decide, okay, well, we will just be real hard and take away this from Lawrence, raise up this and
well, from my experience, and of course this is a Tobago House of Assembly context, and I am sure it will be multiplied when it comes to the national context. So the call circular is issued, and all divisions, ministries will be invited to submit their estimates based on the call circular, based on the Vision 2030, based on the strategic goals and objectives and the strategic plan of the ministry and divisions or departments. And this is both the THA, the ministry, as well as state enterprise, because there's a specific manual for state enterprise companies. The minister would have indicated, I think there were meetings and collaborations with different entities, NGOs, so different persons will also submit recommendations. So in terms of the Tobago House of Assembly context, they will meet with different sectors, the tourism sector, who will have their particular priorities, and they will have their interests. We meet with the agriculture sector. An invitation is always extended in terms of the pass regime for the trade unions. So every sector, supermarkets, manufacturing, every sector will be engaged so that you understand what their needs are. But at the end of the day, we are all competing for scarce financial resources. So then, what is the overarching priority of the government? And everything basically has to fit into that overarching priority. So each ministry, each division, the Tobago House of Assembly, the municipal corporations, state enterprises, they would have a piece of what we call the national pie, and they will all ask for what they think is the optimum. Because like you manage your household, your children want A, B, C, D, everything, but you have one or two, you have the family income, and then you have to live based on the income that you receive. And for the government, our revenue by and large is from gas and oil. In this period, because of the Ukraine war, we have a slight increase, but we don't know how long that is sustainable for. Today, tomorrow, the circumstances can change. So then we have to budget and manage prudently. And because there is finite resources, everybody will get a piece, but everybody will not get what they want.
And Petal made an important point about everyone making their claim for a stake. And in terms of Tobago, well, we know the THA would have asked for 6.9 of the stake, which was about $3.92 billion or so. And we saw the allocation being about 2.5 billion, which is really about 4.3%. And but what was interesting about this is this has been one of the larger increase year on year, because when you compare what we received last year to what we received this year, in the recurrent side, you had an increase of about $172 million. So even when you look at the government's you know, consideration for Tobago, it has been even more favorable in this
Than
instance
before.
than before.
And then that doesn't include all the other.
Included.
And even when it looks to the DP side, I think it's the largest. It's not what we want, but it's the largest DP budget that we would have received as a THA, because in the past it's 264 there around million. This time around it's 300
million.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then CPEP, there was a slight increase in
Yes.
CPEP.
No, CPEP actually remained, because
The
that was
9.2?
that was
Okay.
the allocation last
Okay.
year. Yeah, when I did
And
research.
it speaks to what the Minister of Finance,
Yeah.
and I think the Prime Minister said that yes, we got a bump in some revenues, and we are seeking for everyone. We are seeking to increase in some areas in terms of the allocation, but there is still a requirement for the citizenry to also absorb some of it. So,
and for me as well, you know, in terms of the THA, it now means that the THA has to become a bit more innovative, a bit more creative in terms of how we, you know, utilize that funding and those resources to really build out a robust private sector, build out a manufacturing sector, build out a creative sector, expand tourism,
expand
how do we
agriculture.
generate expand agriculture, how do we generate revenue within Tobago space so that we can maximize what is given to us. So we're getting 2 billion, but can we now generate an extra 2 billion for ourselves out of our efforts, out of our industries, out of, you know, so it rather than focus on what we didn't get, we asked for 3.9. And when we talk about what we didn't get, it would be remiss of me if I do not say to Tobagonians and remind Tobagonians of what we missed.
Exactly.
The missed opportunity that was carved out for us in that
the guarantee of
The
guarantee.
The guarantee of
So,
six.
rather than hope and pray,
That we
we
get six.
had a guaranteed situation of. And Marilyn, I just want you to show, remind Tobagonians comparatively of what we received, 4.3 in the hope and pray, as opposed to what we could have received,
what we would have gotten
as a guarantee, and that is just the minimum starting point. So
I'll ask the director to pull it
at
up on
some
the screen.
point, but it is important.
I would have sent it to you.
And there's an interesting,
there it is.
The interesting point of this. So we asked for 3.96 in terms of the upper limit,
3.97,
which we know traditionally
we
under the DRC you don't really, but guaranteed as a starting position without you even have to
3.92.
3.9.
Exactly.
So we would have
a difference of
gotten
1.4 billion.
Difference of 1.4.
So we lost 1.4 billion.
So we basically refused, because you remember they basically told the counterparts in Trinidad to reject
the bill.
So we lost 1.4 billion in this budget
as a minimum starting point.
And the minister would have made a reference to those two pieces of legislations that came before the parliament.
So it is my hope, because I know they usually pay a lot of lip service when it comes to the autonomy discussion. It is my hope that they will now encourage their friends, because they know they like friends, so it's Fali and friends. So I hope Fali and friends will encourage Kamla and friends to now.
I really had to put that
together. But in terms of the allocation for Tobago, what I think this administration has to do is to go now and reprioritize, because they would have predicated the estimates
based
on 6.9% or a $3.97 billion. And bearing in mind that we only got 4.3%, what are the initiatives, what will be the priorities going forward with this new allocation that was received yesterday? We are seeing where I am not sure what has now become of the standalone Office of the Deputy Chief Secretary with the absence. So there are areas that I think that the administration can look at to see what the priorities are and make the adjustments.
But I'm sorry, go ahead.
what the past administration would have done is to restrict recurrent and distribute to DP. So there's always the leeway on the recurrent expenditure side, and you will recognize based on the allocation that the significant increases in our allocation for fiscal 2023 came on the recurrent expenditure side. So there's room on the current expenditure side to restrict, because at the end of the day we understand that to advance the development agenda of the island, we need the capital expenditure. And the capital expenditure or the development program expenditure in most instances is insufficient to advance that agenda. So if we reduce our recurrent expenditure and transfer the savings from the reduction of our recurrent expenditure to the development program, this may help. But at the end of the day, the administration still needs to understand what the priorities are. So,
well, I'm hoping that the stagnation that we saw for the last 9 months will end. And I say that from the perspective that you would now be receiving, this will now be your first budget cycle, and you're getting
full allocation.
Your full allocation. For you to, you would not have gotten all that you requested, but you are now in the driver's seat. You're going to be receiving your allocation from central government. So I am hoping that what we saw, and bearing in mind that even though it was 9 months, they were still receiving the allocation that was left.
And also,
I am hoping that you've been given 9 months. Within this 9 months, you should have found your sea legs. So I'm hoping that going forward, you ought to have found your sea legs in this 9 months. So let's see.
And Senator, you made an excellent point, because when you talk to the average Tobagonian, there's really stagnation.
So, sorry, Marjorie, let me just pause for a minute. Sorry to interrupt. I am an average Tobagonian, and I say that because of the sector that I work in. And that sector has been stagnant. When I tell you, truck drivers have been parked up in Tobago.
But let me
they cannot.
Was it necessary?
Because the thing about it, right? So we're saying that it's stagnating, and we're all waiting to exhale. The construction sector waiting next. But in the same breath, and I'm going to get very controversial, you're seeing the opportunities that are now in front of us is not really opportunities available to the average Tobagonian like yourself, who involved in the
only sector that has been excelling for the last 9 months is the entertainment sector.
And that's the reality.
That's the only sector.
But stick a pin. We are saying that it's stagnant. Nothing is happening in particularly the construction sector,
which is a major sector.
It cannot be said that is happening because of lack of funding.
Exactly.
Let me continue. Because one of the things that the minister did not spare us yesterday, he said that the Tobago House of Assembly, I think, would have received 96% of its allocation, and they will receive the full 100%.
So it's not an issue of funding from central government.
So it's not an issue of funding.
And make the point that this is about, not the first time.
That we have received 100% of the allocation.
And remember, I don't know if you remember what we did. We recall that up to the point of March, there was about.
I was now going to bring that $1.3 billion in unspent balances.
But that's the point.
So that's why I asked you, was the stagnation necessary?
No,
but that's the point.
Funding
available. The stagnation clearly was not, and that's why I made the point now that you have gotten your sea legs, because clearly the stagnation was not caused by shortfall. the stagnation was caused by management.
Right.
But I'm
If you
Capacity.
that's right.
Yeah.
And if you're at the end of the calendar year, we come into the end of the calendar year. We at the end of the financial year, going into a new financial year. It says that that going forward, the stagnation
but here what
should
is
cease.
Should cease.
But here's what
That's
the
all I'm
worrying part for us. You would recall the chief secretary coming
Came
to
into
us in his
office.
statement and said they had about
treasury
$700 million
Yeah.
in liabilities, right? At this point, he is now treating that with, I think it's one audit that he said is about
Complete.
$300
Yes,
million
well, not
in
completed.
liabilities. So I'm saying these are monies owed that have not yet been paid, and this is going into
A
your
new
new financial
fiscal
fiscal period. You've also committed over $206 million in new work that is being carried over as well, right? And we have the finance guru to help us really match out how this would, what does this mean for the assembly and treating with all that it wants to do in this new period, understanding that there are liabilities being carried over.
So it's twofold. So just to go back a bit, in coming into office, the chief secretary would have claimed that no unspent balance was in the account. And at the time, from my recollection, the unspent balance would have been calculated. However, it may not have been transferred into the bank account of the Tobago House of Assembly.
Okay.
So what is unspent balance? Unspent balance is the difference between what you would have received
What you use.
versus what you would have spent, and you take into consideration whatever bank charges or whatever charges that you would have. So the balance there is transferred into an account specific for that. What is done is that the Division of Finance will invite all the divisions, because they are intimately involved in their accounting, so the divisions will submit to the Division of Finance what their unspent balance is. We will just verify, and at the end of the day, through approvals, that sum will be transferred. At the time of the election, that had not happened. The transfer had not yet been made. I think there were some divisions who were at the time outstanding in submitting their unspent balances. So it wasn't that there was no unspent balance to be utilized by this current administration. It's just that it was not yet transferred from the division's bank account into the bank account specific for that.
And the Secretary of Finance didn't understand.
Well, I cannot. So going back to the question now, it means that if funds, and they will receive 100% of the allocation, so you can say the release / the allocation minus whatever they would have expended and the charges and whatever, that will form the unspent balance going into the new year that will be used for what the assembly deemed necessary to be utilized for. What also happens is that if you have unpaid or accounts payable or commitments, the commitments are actually the first call, or to be the first call. No, not on the unspent, but on the allocation for the new fiscal. So you should attempt to clear off whatever debt you have.
Right.
Before you start.
Before you start to use the money.
So bear with the layman here. So we are now in a situation where we are owing contractors a considerable amount of money, but yet we sign in new contracts. So we yet to pay off what we owe, but yet we enter into new arrangements.
You want me to answer?
Well, it could be considered a rhetorical question, so. But I'm just putting that out there for thought.
But you know,
Based on what you
I'm
just
looking at Tobago as a, let's say it's in terms of an economy and as a balloon. Let's say, so we have, just a layman talk now. So let's say we have a pool of $1 billion in this pool.
Correct.
And for the average Tobagonian living. And we are trying to, if we say we want to grow the economy, so we are putting opportunities to Tobagonians. But if in doing that, and you're doing different works and you're circulating the funds, from that pool of 1 billion, you then put about 300 million of that, and then you give it to some out. It comes out of the balloon, this balloon that is
the circulation is less, the amount to circulate.
So doesn't that mean that it ultimately you have less?
Yes, the multiplier effect.
So you remove the multiplier, and what you really have is a reduction, a shrinking of the. And I'm wondering, I put that into the context, right? Into the context, and just for the average Tobagoan to understand that when whatever location we have, and when you have a situation where the opportunities that should rightfully go to the people of Tobago is siphoned and shipped, redistributed elsewhere. What in essence happens is that the economy of Tobago and it shrinks. And this is something we all should be concerned about. I'm putting it in a general sense, and perhaps maybe we'll talk about specifics after, but just for us to understand as Tobagonians, in a real sense, when we get our allocation, why it is important that we try to maximize and share the opportunities
in Tobago,
right?
Because there's a spin-off effect. There is a spin-off effect.
Thank you.
Because if I'm a contractor in Tobago and I am given a contract by the THC, and I who do I hire?
Tobago.
Who do I hire? Because I have worked for Trinidad, major Trinidad contractors. Yes, they hire people when they come to Tobago, but when you look at the workforce,
is predominantly
mobilized.
You bring them because you are bringing your expertise.
Correct.
You see, if I'm coming to do a 6 months contract, I am not going to
try and
train people. So what contractors would do is give a token. So they'll have tokenism in the employment. So they'll pull in 1 or 2 Tobagonians in the mix. Because from my experience, when I worked with a particular company, they had about 14 trucks in Tobago pulling material, and of the 14 drivers, only 2 were Tobagonians. And so that's the kind of dynamics we're talking about. So there is really no ripple effect when you. And bear this in mind, I don't have a problem with Trinidad contractors coming to
and I think we need to make that point. Because it's not about
discriminating.
Not sharing. But it can be a situation where the Tobago contractors are also not benefiting.
That's right. And when they have the capacity
to do the work.
Correct.
So I could understand if you bring somebody, because that specific contractor that I worked with, based on the contract that they were doing at that time,
nobody else had.
There was no, and I don't even think, based on the technical requirements of the contract, there was no contractor in Tobago, especially at that time.
That is understood.
So the roads that are now being constructed in time for Carnival under emergency.
Well, I brought this booklet, Public Sector Investment Program Tobago, and when you look throughout the booklet, and this was what, 2022, sorry? The amount of work that is in this document as to what was accomplished in Tobago, I wonder the narrative that nothing was done in Tobago.
Wow.
What was in this? And these projects are actual projects
that were done by
the previous administration. And so it says that there is capacity in Tobago to do particular works. I'm making it abundantly clear, I have no problem with a Trinidad contractor coming to do work, or even a foreign contractor. Because when it comes to the capabilities to do a particular work, If you can't find it here, fine.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you all a difficult question because I'm taking over the moderator role. So based on the recent, because we sat in the house, we saw a preliminary audit. It was strange because the question was why not wait until you have the final
audit,
yes.
correct.
You know, where the conclusions are definitive and that kind of thing. And let us treat wherever there's wrong, we treat with the wrong, let the chips fall where they may. Why not wait? And is it that there's a clear case or a clear attempt when you listen to also the information brought forward from the political leader of the PNM, Mr. Dennis? Is there a clear case, or could it be a constructive kind of way of
sidelining,
destroying the reputation of Tobago contractors as in an effort to create a narrative and justify the actions?
I refuse.
No, I'm asking.
No,
you.
It's definitely something to consider.
Yes.
I refuse to believe that
responsible administration.
Good words.
Well, here, I have some clips, and I'm hoping we have the clips and perhaps people
I refuse to believe as well that a responsible
We'll deliberately shut out to tarnish and malign.
So what are we going to do?
The island, and it's not about PDP or
No,
it
it's
ought
about
not to
No,
be
no, no,
about
it shouldn't
PDP
be.
or PNM anymore.
What we're
Because
going to do, just listen to 2 clips because this, I think we definitely have a part 2 of this discussion coming because we are a bit over time.
oh, is
But
that time?
I want us just to listen to those 2 clips I would have sent the director. Could you pull up the first clip with the Secretary of Works, Infrastructure and so on?
You don't want to play the first
Or
one
you want us to go with the political leader?
First, yeah.
Or let's go with the one with the political leader, Mr. Dennis, and let's hear what he would have had to say in comparison to what we would hear after.
So when you get into the details, and I want to point to one particular item in this proposal, it is said here that the rate for hot mix is $2,700 per ton. When I did my inquiries, because where I sat as Chief Secretary, we always relied on the technical people and the public servants to provide us with the information with respect to estimates, cost, and quantities. Because I'm no engineer, and I am certainly no lawyer. So when I did my checks, it was told to me that under the previous administration, there was one particular approved rate for hot mix of $1,400 per ton. So this rate that has been agreed upon by this current THA executive, at least for hot mix, is almost inflated by 100%. Again, Tobagonians must be reminded that the Chief Secretary told the public yesterday, based on information that he has from the audit, the previous incarnation of the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and the Environment engaged in a process of inflated project costs. So I did some comparisons. I asked a learned quantity surveyor. I'm not going to name them, but in cases where I don't necessarily have the expertise, I rely on others. So I asked a couple individuals to look at this document and compare it to previous bills of quantities and previous proposals and previous rates that were used, that the Chief Secretary himself has labeled as overpriced and inflated. And when the comparison was done, and I'm using this project as an example, that they approved for $54 million. When the evaluation was done, it was discovered that this same project that this administration approved for $54.7 million. When you plug the numbers into the system using the previous rates, the project could have been done or would have been done using the previous rates for $36.1 million, which represents an increase of $18.6 million. Now, if this situation holds true across all the projects approved by this executive over the last month, the total is $309 million. The excess is some 34%. These projects, utilizing the rates previously used by the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and the Environment, which the Chief Secretary has labeled as overpriced and inflated, could have been done for $203.9 million. Therefore, I am forced to conclude that through this arrangement with these contracts that were sole selected, the people of Tobago stand to lose some $109 million. So the Chief Secretary, let me reiterate, went to the House based on the findings of an audit of the previous process. The previous process was based on particular rates. His Executive Council approved a number of projects based on rates in excess of the rates that he already said, based on this audit, is excessive.
Serious information. And while we're pondering on that, we want to go right into the next clip where we would have seen Secretary Assemblyman Trevor James attempt is the word I want to use to bring clarity to some stuff. Let's go right into it, Director.
I think Mr. Parks won a project, one of the open tender projects. So we are moving the direction in a more professional project management way, and nobody in Tobago, nobody in Trinidad has been blacklisted thus far.
How do you respond, therefore, to the concern that's raised that all these contracts would have been given to Trinidad contractors over Tobago contractors?
It matters not, Julian. However, at the division, you see, the Chief Secretary presented the audit, but at the division, the information on the projects were available, and it was clear to us that there might be a position in the future when these contracts were audited, and we are not going to complicate matters by offering selective tendering to contractors who are being audited, so that you would find, when I use the Parks example, in an open tender, anybody can tender, and the assessment will be based on the project criteria. But in a strategic manner, as an assembly, we need to demonstrate that we have an understanding of the history, and especially the recent history. And so the criteria that we've developed would determine who contractors. It doesn't matter if they're from Trinidad, Tobago, or China. It doesn't matter.
Assemblyman James, you say it matters not, yet during the campaign of the PDP, this was rallied, this was campaigned, this was one of the key factors during the campaign, that there would be opportunities for Tobago's contractors. How do you respond to that?
Maria, we are 9 months into a term. 9 months. In Tobago, it has now become public knowledge that some of our major contractors might or may have colluded to defraud the people of Tobago. That's information that we have. It has been presented by an auditor. Under what justification, on what matrix can we arrive at a position that before this audit is resolved, that we would willfully go out and call one of these same contractors to tender in a similar way for works that they are complaining they don't have money now to tender for us. It just makes no sense. And so the expectation, when people see that we have gone to Trinidad contractors, what they are saying is that, listen, you should give the Tobago contractors, notwithstanding what has happened. And I don't agree with that. I think that, and I want to say to Tobago, you will see new contractors in this space. Some will be Trinidadians, some will be Tobagonians. We hope.
I am blown away. I am flabbergasted. This is, I mean, the most sullying part of this is that you are literally hearing it from the individual. And we want to leave this at this juncture. And for those who have been on the live requesting a part 2, you will not wait in vain, because we will continue this discussion next week, Tuesday, as we continue to open up. And we've shifted a bit from the core of the budget discussion to now look at Tobago and what we've seen happening in Tobago, and how these happenings will now further negatively impact the budgetary allocations that we've received, though they are saying it is not enough and it's not what they wanted. But we're seeing a number of things that would have been done before. Yeah, persons literally asking if we have to stop now. But we definitely have to shut down. I want to just open the floor for closing remarks quickly before the director shuts us down.
Closing remarks. I don't know, time flies when you're having fun. I didn't recognize that it was so way past 9. I really enjoyed the discussions this afternoon. I was happy that we were able to share and give some information to the public, because we have been seeing on the live where persons feel educated by what we have been saying. So stay tuned for part 2.
Definitely.
Stay tuned for part 2.
Part 2 will be fire, and I promise you we may have some surprises as well in terms of added guest appearance.
Arsenal.
So we have Senator, always a pleasure having you here. Thank you. Thank you to our patient director.
Yes.
The time really flew, and I just want to thank each and every one of you for continuing to log on, continuing to be with us, continuing to share the messages and even the encouragement and so forth. And the prayerful support. We love you, we appreciate you, and we will continue to be here representing you and continuing to edify and educate the public on matters, you know, important to the people of Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, I want to thank you guys as always for allowing me to be part of the minority report, because I'm not part of the minority, but it's good to be part of the minority report. I think it's an opportunity to educate to educate all of us, because even when that's right, as panelists we learning. I'm a first-time senator, my first budget cycle as a senator, so we are all learning, and I trust that as we continue to bring the information to the citizenry, that they'll be receptive to it, and their minds will be open, and people will have a greater understanding of what we do and why we do what we do. I know coming up, some of the measures may be challenging for the citizens, but I believe that we are strong people, we are determined people, and we will find a way out of any challenge that we may be facing. So thanks again for having me as part of you.
And as we close, you know what I found interesting? You know that I looked at the comments under that Barbados situation, and the comments are quite similar. So it's not that our people are unreasonable, and it is a natural human reaction. If things go up, you will be frustrated.
Because people are going to feel it.
I have no challenge with our people, you know, expressing themselves. But what we are saying at the end of the day, we all have to understand that we are in challenging times. Sometimes some of the responses will not all times be popular, but we are hopeful that we would be able to make it out together, and then we can
Navigate.
see a period of prosperity
Yeah.
again, where we all can now
Yes.
enjoy
Yeah.
the good times as well.
Correct.
Very important that we have to work together.
Yes.
Yes.
And so, folks, thank you for logging on tonight. And what I'll close by saying is something that you've heard echoed almost in every program, that the People's National Movement, whether in power or in opposition, continue to support the population, continues to educate the population, and continues to represent the interests and the needs of the population at large. I'm Marlon David, your host for this evening. I want to thank the panelists for continuing this discussion, and we look forward to seeing you all next week, in addition to the additions to the panel that are going to be coming. So folks, thanks for viewing, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good night.